Let me be direct with you right now, because what is unfolding in Indiana deserves to be examined carefully, honestly, and without sugarcoating a single detail. This situation has moved beyond the realm of normal growing pains. This has crossed into something that genuinely raises questions about organizational competence, about leadership accountability, and about whether the Indiana Fever truly understand what they have in Caitlin Clark, or whether they are actively squandering it right in front of our eyes. Let's establish the foundation first, because context is everything here. Caitlin Clark is working her way back. She is under a minutes restriction. That is the stated plan. And on the surface, a minutes restriction sounds completely reasonable. Players returning from physical setbacks get eased back in all the time. Coaches monitor workloads. Medical staff set parameters. That is standard professional sports protocol, and nobody with any sense is arguing against protecting a player's long-term health. That part is not the issue. The issue is everything surrounding that restriction. Because when you actually look at how Clark is being deployed during this so-called reintegration process, the word plan starts to feel generous. 2 minutes at a time, then off. 90 seconds on the floor, then back to the bench. The longest stretch she played in a single rotation was reportedly 3 minutes. 3 minutes? And in between those fragments, she's riding a stationary bike on the sideline while the game continues without her. Now ask yourself a serious question. If the restriction is so severe that she can only handle 90 seconds to 3 minutes of action at a stretch, what exactly?
What did the Sparks do that you saw that you did not expect them to do tonight, coming in, that allowed them to score as many points as they did tonight?
I don't think they did anything that we didn't expect them to do. I think we certainly understand how capable of a team they are. I felt like we just didn't match their energy.
Is being accomplished by putting her out there at all. Because basketball is not a sport where you find rhythm in fragments. Basketball is a sport built on timing, on chemistry, on read and react continuity that develops over possessions and sequences. You cannot establish any of that in 90 seconds. You cannot contribute meaningfully to offensive flow when you're checking in, barely settling into the game's tempo, and then immediately coming back out again. So if the restriction is that tight, the more coherent decision is to hold her out entirely until she can handle meaningful minutes. Let her get healthy, let her get right, and then bring her back when she can actually impact the game in a real and sustained way.
Their toughness, we didn't match their effort tonight.
Stephanie, I just wonder what you made of Caitlin's performance over the 16 minutes.
All right, here we go with the Caitlin talk.
And why maybe you didn't get the best out of her tonight.
Yeah, look, anytime you've missed, a couple weeks, it's going to take some time to get acclimated. I think it's going to take some time to build endurance. She hadn't really been able to practice all that much either. They pressured 94 feet, so again, you got to make sure that you're able to withstand some of that. It's never easy when you're reintegrating.
What is happening instead is a strange middle ground that serves nobody. Not Clark, not her teammates, and certainly not the team's performance. And this is where Stephanie White enters the conversation, because the head coach stepped to the podium and attempted to explain all of this. The word that kept appearing was reintegration. The offense needs reintegration. The flow needs time. Bringing Clark back in takes adjustment.
After pressure to 94 feet, so again, you got to make sure that you're able to withstand some of that. It's never easy when you're reintegrating, after injury. So I thought she did some really good things. It's just a tough scenario when you're on a minutes restriction and you're trying to get back into rhythm throughout the course of the season. So she's going to continue to be better, and we're going to continue to be better, and as we get her back, working back in.
But here's the part that stopped people cold. White essentially acknowledged that the Indiana Fever operate in two completely different systems. One system functions when Caitlin Clark is on the floor. An entirely different system takes over when she is not. Two identities, two operational modes, one team. That is not a minor tactical wrinkle. That is a structural identity crisis. You cannot build genuine offensive cohesion when your team fundamentally transforms every time a single player checks in or checks out.
Had 60 points in the paint tonight. Just what were the breakdowns in the front court, especially with AB out?
Yeah, that's a big one. Right, that's a big one because she's our anchor. She's our anchor. She's our communicator. She's our rim protector.
Oh, what? You got Dantas. You wanted Dantas, right? We're going to get to what Kelsey Mitchell had to say, too. This is ridiculous on all fronts. They feel like they don't need Caitlin Clark. It's ridiculous.
We don't have a transition defense when you give it to them and they're able to score. We don't have a a transition defense when you give it to them and they're able to score, turnovers for touchdowns, so to speak.
You cannot talk about difficulty reintegrating someone when the honest answer is that the foundation was never cohesively constructed around her in the first place. Because if she was truly built into the blueprint from the beginning, her return should feel like restoration. It should feel like plugging the main power source back into the grid and watching everything illuminate again.
To them and they're able to score, turnovers for touchdowns, so to speak.
That she never talked about Kelsey Mitchell turnovers. She didn't sub Kelsey Mitchell out after those horrific turnovers, but okay.
I felt like some of our rotations weren't there. As good of activity level as we had a game ago, I don't think we had that here tonight. Again, it's big when you don't have an AB on the floor. Certainly, we didn't have Sophie early as she locked up early. Before even warm up, so we didn't have her early as well. So I think more than anything, collectively, just the team defensive effort, making sure we're in our rotations, having each other's back. It wasn't there consistently.
Instead, her return is being described as a complication, as something that requires careful management and cautious navigation. That framing is a problem. Then there is the matter of Kelsey Mitchell, who also stepped to the podium and offered her perspective on the team's offensive struggles.
It's about showing up. It's my job. I'm going to do my job every day. I think that this game can't be taken for granted. You got to respect it. You got to pour in whatever you got into it. And give that every time. I don't think there's an excuse that you can give to do this job, and I think that I do my damnedest to make sure that I show up. If I can lace them up and I can do what I need to do, then I'm going to do it.
Mitchell talked about the lack of flow. She talked about needing to piece things together. And again, on paper, those sound like reasonable observations from a veteran player processing a difficult stretch. But listen to what was missing.
Hi, ladies. Charlotte.
I thought they did a great job at break point. Turnovers that led to
It seemed like this game was or something like there was.
So it's always disjointed, disoriented when.
Do you feel like there was this sort of a little bit of a disjointedness that you guys never could quite get past?
I think flow is always disjointed, disoriented when you don't defend. I think that anything that you want to do on the offensive end, you can't do when you don't defend the ball. If you're getting the ball at the net every possession, you're going to be discombobulated. I think for us, we kind of shot ourselves in the foot because we couldn't find a decent flow offensively, but I think that's a testament to how bad our defense was.
There was no emphatic declaration that this team is built around Caitlin Clark and that everyone is adjusting accordingly. There was no strong public reinforcement that the reintegration is temporary turbulence on the way back to the established vision. Instead, the emphasis drifted toward the team being capable on its own, toward figuring things out, toward managing the offense collectively. The underlying message, whether intentional or not, carried a distinct undertone. We can do this without her. And that perception, once it takes root publicly, is extraordinarily difficult to walk back. Now layer in the accountability dimension, because this cannot be ignored. Turnovers were a significant issue in this game. Kelsey Mitchell had turnover sequences that were damaging, costly, the kind of mistakes that shift momentum and cost teams points. And yet, there was no immediate substitution. There was no visible urgency to pull her out and reset. The same patience and continuity extended to Mitchell was not extended to Clark, who was being rotated out after 90-second stretches, regardless of how the possession went. That inconsistency is glaring. Fans see it, analysts see it. And when that inconsistency sits alongside public comments about how difficult it is to reintegrate Clark, the interpretation writes itself. This also speaks directly to coaching. The criticism of Stephanie White has been pointed and harsh. Poor coaching, dropped the ball. These are serious characterizations, and they come from a place of genuine frustration because the situation feels avoidable. A clearer structure could have been implemented. If the medical restriction demanded extreme caution, the smarter public move was decisive clarity. Say the restriction is non-negotiable. Say the plan is explicitly defined. Own the approach with confidence and specificity so that the narrative is controlled, or rather than left open to interpretation. Instead, what came from the podium were broader explanations about offensive systems and reintegration challenges. And when you leave ambiguity in that space, observers fill it with their own conclusions. Right now, those conclusions are not favorable to Indiana's leadership. Let's also consider the psychological dimension for Clark herself. Imagine working your way back with genuine urgency. You are focused, you are prepared. You check into the game knowing your window is extremely short, which means every possession carries immediate pressure. You have to make something happen right now because you will be back on the bench in 90 seconds. That compressed urgency does not promote natural playmaking. It promotes tension, it promotes forced decision-making, and then you're back on the bike, watching again, waiting again. Rhythm in basketball is not a luxury, it is a necessity. And the current approach is systematically preventing Clark from finding any. All of this accumulates into a picture that has observers using words like embarrassing, debacle, and clown show. Those are emotionally charged words, but they reflect a genuine and growing frustration that something obvious is being mishandled at an organizational level. Because this was not a one-game stumble. This is a pattern of decisions and public communications that consistently frame Clark as a reintegration challenge rather than as the player this franchise is supposed to be built around. The Indiana Fever faced a team that was shorthanded. No Kelsey Plum, no Cameron Brink. On paper, that should be a favorable matchup. And yet, the dominant post-game conversation was about how hard it is to work Clark back into the offense. Not about competitive performance. Not about capitalizing on an opportunity. About reintegration difficulty. That tells you everything about where this organization's head is right now. Here is the bottom line. This does not have to spiral into something irreparable. The path forward exists, and it is not complicated. Define the plan with absolute clarity. If the restriction requires holding her out longer, then hold her out and explain it decisively. If she is playing, establish structured and meaningful intervals that give her a real chance to affect the game. Align the offensive system consistently so that her presence is not a disruption, but a return to the established identity. Distribute accountability evenly across the roster so that the standard applied to Clark matches the standard applied to everyone else. And speak publicly with unified and unambiguous reinforcement that this team is built around her. Do those things, and the noise quiets. Continue down the current path, fragmented minutes, dual systems, inconsistent accountability, and podium comments that sound more like distancing than alignment. And this situation gets significantly worse, because the scrutiny is not going away. Every short stretch, every stationary bike appearance, every comment about reintegration difficulty, and every visible inconsistency in how players are managed will continue feeding a narrative that the Indiana Fever do not fully know what they want to be. And that narrative is dangerous, not just for the team's performance this season, but for the relationship between this franchise and the player who has the potential to define its entire era. The questions are on the table now. Are they building around Caitlin Clark, or are they building around something else and trying to fit her into it? Are they protecting her, or are they managing her in a way that serves no clear purpose? Those answers need to come quickly, and they need to come through action, not just words at a podium. Because right now, actions and words are telling two very different stories. And the longer that gap exists, the louder the criticism becomes. The clock is ticking in Indiana, and the people in charge need to recognize that before this goes from frustrating to something they cannot walk back,